There was a RUSI report a few months ago which talked about the plausibility of negotiating with the Taliban, and what was said in that report I think is now coming true. There are lots of plausible things that can be talked about between the Taliban and the Karzai government, but there are lots of big hurdles in the way. One is that these talks so far are between the Taliban leaders and the United States, who have tried to broker the talks but have not done it terribly well. Two is the fact that the Taliban have stolen a march on the publicity by using their own title for their office, by using their own flag, by, in a way, cocking a snook at the Karzai government, and that has enraged Hamid Karzai and his ministers, and so that's become a big hurdle. The third problem is the most fundamental of all, which is that the future of Afghanistan after 2014 may be successful or it may not be. But whether it is successful or not is effectively out of our hands. The West, the ISAF forces, America and its allies, can now do very little to affect either the success or failure of what will happen next. And the Taliban won't talk to Karzai, although Karzai has agreed that he will engage in principle in these talks. He's not going to do it now. They will find every excuse to snub him and to make him walk away. The Taliban do not want to talk to Karzai. But what they will do is start to think about the deals that they may make with some other powerful players in a post-Karzai Afghanistan of 2015 and thereafter. And I have a phrase, I call it political cigarette papers. During the war in the Northern Alliance period, 2001, many a time a battle would look as if it was about to take place, and then the night before the battle actually started, men would go from camp to camp with little cigarette papers with messages written on them. And in the morning, some of the forces would have evaporated, some of the forces would have changed sides, and the battle wouldn't actually take place. The Afghans are famous for doing deals privately, quietly, in a very Afghan way, at the very last part of the 11th hour, the 59th minute of the 11th hour. And I suspect that what we'll see here is a political version of that. Not much will happen for the next year or 18 months in these much vaunted talks, but lots of things behind the scenes will be preparing themselves. People will be having talks about talks and will be, in a sense, exchanging political cigarette papers. And at the very last minute, when there is a post-Karzai government to speak to, the warlords, the Haqqani, the Taliban and many other groups representing the ethnic balance of Afghanistan may or may not come to an 11th hour agreement. Whether they do or not is not something that we can actually affect one way or the other now. The best thing that Western decision makers can now do is refrain from making anything worse, which means trying to create the right conditions for this strangely Afghan form of negotiation to carry on, not to lean on the players too hard. This is not Europe, this is not Bosnia, where the United States and Holbrooke could bully people in a room and get the result he wanted. This doesn't work in South Asia. And the most important thing is for the West to keep a military squeeze on the Taliban, which it has been doing reasonably successfully, but without alienating the Afghan government and Afghan peoples. And that's why friendly fire incidents, the use of drones, is now almost certainly causing as much of a problem as it is solving a problem. And so the West, in a sense, has got to be extremely subtle and very careful in the next 12 months or so not to make the present situation any worse. It can't make it much better. It can only now make it worse. The timetable for UK withdrawal is pretty well set. Most of the withdrawal will be backloaded, as it were. Most British troops will stay in place until quite near the deadline, and we'll keep quite a number there, 5,500 or so, until quite late on, and then they'll come out more or less together, and their equipment will come out in various stages after that. And they won't bring their own equipment out, remember. They will come home by aircraft. Their equipment will come out through civil contractors, and it's the civil contractors who will have to, as well, make the arrangements, take the risks, and so on. So the British withdrawal, I think, will be conducted smoothly enough. But none of this affects the timing of the withdrawal. The military withdrawal is, in a sense, is quite a big operation. It can only be done in a certain length of time. If it's to be done in an orderly and economic way. Therefore, the withdrawal is phased from now till the end of 2014. And I think that process will be effectively disconnected from the political process that's going to take place between Taliban warlords and some elements of the Afghan government.